Thank you. My name is Odusanya. I'm a Nigerian. I've been here since 2016. I'm an executive on the Newcomer Youth Council, a member of the Immigrants Advisory Table, and also a member of the Anti-Racism Recovery Project. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Calvin Loy. I'm a Chinese Canadian. I work as a tax accountant in the financial service industries. Three particularly important areas of my volunteering that I'm very passionate about are encouraging, empowering, and inspiring youth, trying to reduce financial barriers for youth to access post-secondary education, and to showcase cultural diversity and its understanding.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corinne Chief. Corinne McKay. Sorry, geez, I just got married a few weeks ago. Thank you. Here we go. So I'm an Ojibwe woman from Wayway Sikapo. I lived out here in Winnipeg since I've been 14, so about 26, 27 years now I've been in Winnipeg, and currently I work in the social services. I work with an agency. I do family enhancement, and I work with youth, families, to get them the supports and resources they need, as this is a systematic thing we do deal with today, and we're just trying to break that cycle. So my role is to keep the families together and find whatever resources and supports they may need along the way so they can stay as one team. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Tolu Ilelaboye, as you know. I'm a member of the Yoruba tribe, which is a tribe in Nigeria, and I was born and raised in Winnipeg, and I'm here as a member of Creation, a social entrepreneur, and someone who continues to just learn and grow through all the different aspects of their life. Right now I'm a student, both of life, but also actually in an academic institution, and just here to actually really learn. So I have my paper out, and I will be taking notes because I think everyone here has something to share. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All right, amazing people, right? So, I'll just kind of share a little bit before we open up with a question in terms of your experience. What has your experience been connected to racism, right? So, I came from Ontario in 2020, right? And if you know Manitoba winters, I'll let you know I got here in December, right? So so it was a very interesting journey, right? And getting here, my wife and I, we have 5 children. So they moved, my whole family moved here. And when we got here, we got connected to the community right away. There were people who walked into our driveway to say, welcome to the neighborhood. And we were like, this is amazing. You know, we're coming into this environment and people are so friendly, so loving. And then we started going out into the community, right? And going to the grocery store and going to the doctors, right? And then there were little things that weren't said directly, but just little stares that you got, or little, things that we noticed that made us start to think, well, maybe everybody's not as welcoming. Right? And in those interactions, we started to learn that, yeah, it is very friendly, it is very loving, but there are definitely things that need to be addressed in terms of how people are treated who are different, right? Who may be considered different, right? So I want to open it up in terms of just a conversation about your journey. And maybe there are things that you've noticed that you think need to be addressed. So I'll just open the floor up. Who would like to share first? Great.
Thank you. So my name is Corinne, and just going back to when I said I was 14 years old since I moved to Winnipeg. I came from Wayway Sikapo First Nation. It's about 3.5 hours from Winnipeg, and just being a teenager, I never thought anything racist didn't even cross my mind. I didn't even know what that meant. I just was surrounded by our own people in our communities. So coming out here, I never experienced that. and I never thought of it. I looked at everybody. I always thought, oh, we're all the same. We're made up of the same parts, you know. We're all the same, just different color, different culture. So I always acknowledged that, and you know, along my path, and I never experienced that. But I have 2 stories to share. I know I have a lot more, but these 2 specific stories I just wanted to share and how I've experienced it. So when I was 29, I was going to Red River College at the downtown campus Princess location. So it was visibly, I was the only Indigenous person that I could see in the classroom. It was a lot of students were just coming from different parts of the world. And I show up one morning, and it was our midterms. And I'm waiting outside, you know, because they unlock the door, and it's all computer stuff because I was in the business administration program. So I open the door, or we're all in the hallway, sorry, and then somebody said, "What are you doing here?" "Well, don't we have midterms?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, that's what I'm here for." And they said, "Well, why are you here? Don't you get your education for free?" And I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "No, we don't." I said, there's an application, and they only sponsor so many students every year, and there's a process for the Indigenous population and for your community. And they just kind of giggled at me, and I was like so cheesed off. I was pissed off. First thing in the morning, you know, I'm there early just like everybody else. And I said, "If you'd like, I'd bring my student loan documents, and if you want to pay, just let me know." And that's, you know, and I had a smile on my face just as I said it, as much as I was so annoyed. Geez, they don't know who I am. And we continue on to the midterm. Next couple days, when we got back in after midterm week was over, and I just went to the person. I said, "If you want to know who we are, where we come from, what our life is, what it looks like, what I experience," I said, "I'm more than happy to share with you." So she's like, "Oh, okay." Like, she was just thrown back of what I had to say and how I approached that. The second one, and I continued, and I graduated from business administration back then. And, you know, stuck with the group and shared every time, like, "Oh, I'm going to a culture event. Does anybody want to come? It's a powwow. It's a university powwow. Come check it out. There's sweats. There's, like, just different ceremonies." So we had a couple students who did come and, you know, just ask questions like just about who I am and what our culture looked like. And I was just the same and just open, and like, "Oh, what do you do? Let's, you know, exchange food one day. Let's have a potluck." So I encourage that with our classmates because everybody is very unique, and I don't judge anybody by race, color. I'm pretty inclusive, and I still am today. And I think that's how it has made me grown from being 14 and now being 42 years old, and just the different experiences and just working with people. Like, I just love people. I like to socialize. So yeah, it just became a good year, and I graduated with them. So it all worked out, and just showing them, because not everybody knows who an Indigenous person is. It's just kind of like, "Oh, there's another person, stay away," you know, kind of attitude. And I did get that throughout the college, but it was, we did a buddy system. We learned each other's culture, and we just kind of alternated between different backgrounds and buddied up. My second experience was when I was around 26 also. I was downtown, and we were taking a bus, me and my now husband. And it was about 9:30, and I didn't have a vehicle we didn't have a vehicle at the time. And we were taking the bus, and we had our bus passes because we were both students. So this big, there was a big event happening downtown, and we attended at the RBC Center. I believe it was a powwow or something like that. I can't really remember, but it was a big event. And so we were approached, and we visibly knew she was Indigenous. Looked like one of us. So she comes up to us, and she goes, "Do you have any change? I need some change." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, we just have a bus pass." And then she asked my husband, and we're at the bus stop, and he says, "Sorry, we just have the bus pass." And she was walking away. She goes, "Go back to your own country, you Asians." So we get it from our own people, and that's what's taught. And, you know, like, I don't know, I get called Asian, Mexican, Hawaiian, and I'm an Indigenous Ojibwe woman, but you know what I mean? And I was like, oh no, like, just just leave her. You know, she might have been intoxicated. I don't know her walk of life. I just don't want to, you know what I mean? Get into that conversation because it's not the time and place. So we get it from our own people, and that's unfortunate because that's what they're taught too. And, you know, like just since this Truth and Reconciliation has come about, and about residential schools, now, like, I feel to be like a proud Indigenous woman because I was like, okay, I'll say whoever, whenever I want to say, if I'm in Asian or Hawaiian, that's who I am. But today I am proud to say that I'm an Ojibwe woman. And like I said, it's taught. You know, as a baby, they're not born racist. They're not born like that. It's just taught within the home, the school, whatever, wherever they're around. So I just acknowledge that, and I just like to take the time to just pull them aside if they are willing to, and just say, this is who we are. You want to connect? Let's go here. We can start there. You know, and that's how we combat, and that's how we fight that, because they don't know. And we don't know who, you know, their culture, and it's kind of like just a two-way street that we all need to take moving forward. And thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
Corinne, thanks for sharing your story. I wanted to jump in there because I think what you said about the experience of racism, both from outside of your community, but also from within your community. I literally just had this conversation at lunch with my uncle who's speaking on the panel next door. I was born in Winnipeg to Nigerian parents, and you know, we grew up in the south end of Winnipeg in Fort Richmond, and in that area during the time that I was growing up, there was predominantly white folk. You know, my oldest sister graduated from the same high school that my youngest cousin graduated from. He's 22 now, 23, don't quote me on that. But there's a 20-year difference between them. And when my oldest sister graduated, she was one of 3 people of color in that school. And when my cousin graduated 20 years later, over 50% of the school was born outside of Canada. And not even included in those numbers were the numbers of Indigenous students who were also coming into the school. And what was really interesting about seeing the difference between his graduation and my older sister's graduation is just how much that area shifted. But you can also imagine that as I was growing up in that area, how not white I felt all the time, constantly. And so I grew up in a world and in a space where you were trying to constantly fit into your own community and circles, you know, the Nigerian community, the Yoruba community specifically, but also trying to find a way to fit into the circles of friends and all the groups that you had. And I remember distinctly spending some time in, you know, the Nigerian community at kids' birthday parties and things like that, and not necessarily feeling as included with our parents and our families and our community, but also being at school, going to those birthday parties and not feeling included there. And that's not something that's really changed too extensively in the communities that I serve. I still often find myself feeling out of place in white communities. And you know, I was talking about my uncle, how in our churches, in the Nigerian churches, there's a lot of them. They're very big here as well. And I know that my pastor, when we go to church, he'll say stuff like, look at Tolu, she's Canadian and not Nigerian. And that exclusion from within our own communities is palatable, it is tangible, but then also exclusion from every other community that exists. And so myself as a non-binary person, as a person who also never really fit in and never really felt like they fit in, I just created my own spaces and started creating new spaces for me to fit in. And a lot of that came into bringing other people who also felt like they didn't really fit in, and just creating space where a bunch of oddballs were sitting in a room together and creating community, right? And so redefining what spaces and what community looks like. I actually wrote it down, and I said I have notes. One of the conversations we had at the last, in the last one, talking about making our culture mainstream. And I asked myself in that moment, what does mainstream mean? What does that even mean? What's the purpose of it? Why do we want to be mainstream? Why do we try to achieve something when that is inherently saying that everyone is going to be the same, when we're all so different? Mainstreaming means that we're trying to make everything follow the same path. We're all on different paths, and understanding that, internalizing that, digesting that, and sitting with that is really what it comes down to when I think about dismantling racism, is every single person individually taking our own power, taking our own understanding of self and accepting that, and then letting every other person do that without encroaching on that person's ability. When we think we have power over someone else's story, we are inherently embodying colonization, and we're inherently embodying everything that every other person has ever done to our communities. And so for me, it's really about not being mainstream. It's about making sure that I maintain my individualism within the spaces that are trying to force me into boxes. And so my experience of racism is ongoing. I mean, we haven't yet dismantled it. There's a big old world to dismantle a lot of it. So it's an individual journey until we understand the really intimate individual nature of decolonization, of anti-racism work. If we don't think about those moments where you're sitting in a room and you walk in and you see people in collars with collared shirts, and you're like, oh, these people might be, wealthy, or maybe we see people in sweatpants and hoodies, which I honestly thought about wearing today. And we think maybe these people are experiencing poverty, right? Like, those are moments where we have to say, stop. Where did these judgments, where did these ideologies come from? And what's the root of that? And how do I shift that to choose a different life and to live in my uniqueness? So that is my experience of racism and how I approach it now.
So first off, I'd like to thank the panel here for sharing their experiences. It's certainly not something that everyone can do, at any point in time. It requires a lot of courage and strength. So thank you to my fellow peers. My experience with racism began when I was in elementary school, and it's a very classic example, and it all comes from wonton soup. So wonton soup in my culture, very common. We have wonton soup very often. So I would have that for lunch at school very often. And I would get those comments like, ew, what's that smell? Or this lunch is not normal. I didn't have, sandwiches for lunch, or, things like that that were quote unquote normal. And so I thought that my wonton soup was not normal, and I remember not having it for, I think, the rest of that school year. So very small things like that, where I felt like I did not fit in because I couldn't see other people having this type of lunch. And at that point, I thought nothing of it. I thought, this must just not be appropriate to bring to school. But it's not until later on in life that I realized, that was not okay. So it's very unfortunate that what you hear from a lot of people who share their encounters with racism, it actually starts at such a young age, when people are still, in their early elementary years, and they don't know that that's actually racism, but that's what they're encountering on a daily basis. So a theme that I've heard from your sharing your experiences is that individuality is just embracing yourself and who you are as a person. And so I think that's very key in combating racism as well. This is who I am, this is the food that I eat, a very simple example. And, you don't have to like it, but, that's who I am. And I'm willing to share my experience and my food and my culture with you if you're willing to learn. So I think the first key in solving racism, and it's never going to be solved overnight. I think we've all accepted that feat. There's years and years and years of work to do still. But I think the first step is that acknowledgement from the other party and yourself as well, that we're still on a learning journey. Most of us are. We're at different stages in it, which is perfectly okay. Whether you're at the beginning, whether you think you're halfway, whether you think you're almost at the end, that's perfectly okay. We acknowledge that, and having those conversations between each other, which again, this is one of them, to learn from people from different walks of life. I think we oftentimes stay within our own comfort zone, and I think that might add and fuel to the racism or the unknowing micro aggressions that we might have. And so being uncomfortable, meeting people from different walks of life in situations like this is very, very important to combating racism, understanding and learning from different cultures. After that acknowledgement, that understanding, obviously there's taking action, which is, again, not something that we can do overnight, unfortunately, lifelong journey. And but I think it all starts from that acknowledgement and that understanding.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who's spoken. Just to add to that, I came into this country as an international student. I came in when I was 16. Coming from a country where Nigeria, where all of us are black and most of us are black, coming to a country where everyone felt different from how I was. Coming to this country, being black was not a part of my identity. It was just, everyone was black around me, and now I've come to a country where black is part of my identity. And I came in at 16 and I was overwhelmed. And I never had to worry before about how my accent sounded, because everyone sounded the way it sounded, and now I had to worry about that. And before I realized it, I started feeling this kind of fear, anxiety. Coming to school, I didn't feel safe being in my classes any longer. And over time, I just stopped attending classes altogether because I no longer felt safe being in the classroom. I no longer felt safe speaking out. I no longer felt safe even making friends, because the idea was in my head that I was different and I was being judged for how I looked or how different I was. And it took some time to come to having a community around me, people that cared about me and also motivating me to move out of my comfort zone. And part of the reason why I joined the Immigrant Advisory Table was to give a voice to many immigrants or international students that come into this country, and they come to a place that's very different from from their home, and they don't really know who to turn to. They don't really know anything about the current system, and a lot of it has to come into. And everyone, there's an expectation that coming into this country, you have to fit in by letting go of your identity. You have to change your accent to sound more Canadian. You have to know how to, you have to obey the laws of the land, which is natural. But you have to kind of give out some level of identity, or sacrificing some level of culture just to fit in. And part of combating racism is giving a voice and power to people, the racialized immigrants, and joining a group like the Immigrant Advisory Table, just as a volunteer, allows me to be a voice to stand up for people who don't feel safe being in the country, who don't feel safe here, who don't feel like they belong, and just being a voice for them, just a voice that speaks for them, right? And I didn't have anyone to speak for me when I was here. I didn't have anyone to speak for me. I just had to get used to it. I had to go back home for a while and had to come back again to the country. And challenging racism is about giving power to those, to the immigrants. It's about giving power to those who are racialized. Having a lot of it. It would have been a lot easier to come in here and adapt if there were more people, if I had more lecturers that were, Nigerians, if I had more lecturers that were black, if there are more lecturers that are Chinese, and not just everyone being white, And challenging racism is about taking up a position of power, even if we don't necessarily have the necessary experience. If it's about volunteering, I'm still a student. I don't have all the qualifications yet, but the little I can do just by volunteering at the table, the little I can do by joining the Anti-Racism Recovery Project, I do that, and that allows us to have a voice in making the policies that would end up benefiting every immigrant that comes into the country.
I am motivated by challenge of any form. Ask a question. I remember I once got a job at Giant Tiger just because my sister said I couldn't get it. So, I only worked there for 2 weeks. I wasn't cut out. So I'm motivated by the challenge to find equity in all spaces. And I say that as someone, again, who has lived constantly on the cusp. I am 6'1". I stand taller than most people. Automatically, I have an invisible disability. I'm black. I'm non-binary. I'm queer. Find a place where people don't fit in. I probably exist there, and because of that, I am driven to those places because I don't think anyone should ever feel like they don't have something. And you're talking a little bit about redefining spaces and all the rest of it. And I once heard someone say, when we think about DI work, for example, which I've worked in a lot, we have to ask ourselves, diverse from what? And for me, it's often diverse from heterosexuality, diverse from whiteness, diverse from what we've created as mainstream, as the basis, as the standard, right? And so I'm challenged to figure out, how do we change that basis? How do we change our base point, right? And so I like to go into places that feel a little bit gray, a little fuzzy, a little bit like this is the way it has to be, and flip it on its head. How do we change that? How do we think about this differently? Why do we only have one direction or one definition of so many of these different things, right? And so I'm challenged and I'm motivated by the question of, but what if, and why, and how? And if you ask my parents, they'd say the same thing. Try to tell me to do something. I'm like, but why? And like, why is it like that? And how do we do it differently? And what if this thing? And motivated by the challenge to think differently.
I've always thought of myself as quite lucky. I've been able to attend post-secondary education. I've seen others that look like me that have not been so lucky. I've heard of so many stories of individuals who, were not able to do this or that because of a variety of obstacles in their way. And so because I feel like I've been so lucky, I want to give back and help others and ensure they have that equal opportunity of success. So a lot of my work works with inner Winnipeg youth or those who have come to Canada. Let's say that they were highly educated in their own country, but they come here and they lose all that experience and they have to start anew. And so, I just want to ensure everyone has have that equal access to opportunity. So that's what keeps me going, keeps me involved and working to help other people.
So the question is, what keeps us coming back? Or so for myself is, like I said, I lived out here when I was 14 years old, and over the years, I see our own people doing it, and others, and that's not right. See, like everybody has their own ways of learning and how they get there, when they get there. So for myself, I'm so compassionate about having our own communities, like Manitoba, like for instance, Cross Lake, our northern communities are so scared to leave the communities because of racism. Where am I going to fit in? I'm so used to just seeing our own brown faces, our family members, our friends, living in those isolated communities. So it's hard for them. So I'm so compassionate and just wanting to see that change so they can come out and explore and not just be so secluded to one area. There's so much in life. And for me, 14 years old, I never thought like, I'm going to be this or that, or, think of these different barriers that I had faced. I never thought of that. And just giving the opportunity to our upcoming youth, because that is our future. And, I have a little guy who's 5 years old, and just showing him that too. And we live in a small community. And when we bought our home, I was like, oh no, my little son has dark skin, long hair. What is he going to do? Like, what if somebody picks on him about his long hair and bullies and, so forth? So it just gave me more of a boost to show others it's okay. It's okay to be who you are, and, not for anybody to take that away in any, by their words, their actions. I guess just get back to the question is like just being compassionate and letting everybody from our communities, our First Nation communities, to get out of that bubble and to come into mainstreams, as we say. Like, what do we say? Mainstreams is the institutions here in Winnipeg, Brandon, Portage, wherever they may want to further their education, is just to get out of that bubble, teach them, be compassionate of who they are, and stand beside them when they do come to these big cities, towns, wherever they may go to further their education. So I just really want to push that out and share with friends, families, because they're scared. They're scared of how they're going to be looked at, and they see that all over the media: racism, Truth and Reconciliation, the residential school. So a lot of them are afraid being teenagers, and they don't know. Like, all their hormones are, all over the place. They don't know how to feel and how they're going to react. So that's my compassion, is to keep them safe and share that it's okay to be who you are. Thank you.
For me, I would say that I'm motivated by the experiences of others. And anytime I wake up and I see news about racially motivated crime, I just want to work in creating a better, safer place where people don't feel, people are not being punished just because of the way they look, or being treated differently just because of the way they speak. So I am more motivated by the experiences of others. I strive for a world where the future generation doesn't have to experience as much as, the previous generation has experienced in terms of, racism, in terms of, oppression. And that is what, motivates me. Just that I believe it is possible that, it's not going to happen overnight, but that we could reach that level of understanding. And that's what motivates me.
So in my, what my uncles, aunts, my parents, what they've told me is when they first came to Canada, how they were taught was to be hush-hush, which is that, if something happened to you, just accept it, don't make a scene, and, assimilate to our society that we have here in Canada. I heard a quote from someone once, and someone said, racism is the tax we pay to be in Canada. I don't remember who said that to me. It's not my quote. But that was a very light bulb moment, because a lot of immigrants or newcomers to Canada, they have faced racism, and they have felt like they need to be hush-hush about it in order to fit into our society. And that's very unfortunate. That should not be the way it is. In order to get back to your question, in the volunteer work that I've done, I've talked to a lot of youth that come from a variety of different backgrounds, and they always have told me it's very hard to identify themselves. What are they? Are they their own culture, or are they Canadian? And that's why I like to always introduce myself as I'm Chinese Canadian. You can have both in your life. I am very passionate about my Chinese culture, roots, traditions, experiences, but there's also elements of society in Canada that I've learned to enjoy. And it's something maybe as simple as, I love watching hockey, which is not a sport we hear a lot about in China, for instance. And so I think it's very hard to find that balance between your own culture and when you come to Canada, what we have here. But I think it's a journey of learning, but I think you can balance both. It's just a matter of learning, what's most important to you, and understanding that it's okay to not fit in some shape, form, or mold, and that you can have a mix of cultures within you, and that's what makes you unique, and that's what makes our society, really succeed, in my opinion.
With you, in that there has to be some kind of seed that drives us towards, commonality of goals, living, experience. I think that the confusion that I see that exists right now is that commonality is based off of one race, one community, one space. And until we understand that we need to take this seed and maybe put it to the side and create a seed that's created from everyone else's, I think that idea of homogeneity is really challenging, right? And so I think, we can hope and to ask folks to, hockey is a good example. Sports is something that we can all kind of, find a way to play or not play or whatever it might be. But I think that to say that everyone having to come together off of one spot or one place or one thing is challenging, because that means that then someone who doesn't believe in that thing or doesn't agree with that thing might be pushed out of that space. And so I think that I think there are many, many different seeds, for lack of a better way of putting it, many, many, many different seeds that we can all go and be like, I want to be a part of that seed and that seed and that seed. And then those things all have to exist and coexist. I think that to say that we all have to, humanity is our basis. Humanity should be our basis. Having basic needs, having food, having water, that is homogeneity. That is where we should be starting. It shouldn't be based off of the fact that we all need to make an income. That should technically, for me, I feel like that shouldn't even be a thing. We should just all have access to resources, right? But I think that our humanity should be that basis. That's where we should be starting. That's where we should kind of focus our time and energies. Let's find ways for us to all live in community as equitable as possible. And everything else is subsequent to that. How do we live as people in, community with environment, and community with our lived and built environment, natural environments, all of these things, and that should be the basis. So I think for me, when I work with the young people and when I do a lot of what I call social interpretation between people and between bodies and between groups, I talk about being what is the fact that we're here for, it could be, we're here to play basketball, right? We're here to play ball. That's what we're here about, and that's why we're here right now. Everything else is secondary to this goal that we have together. And so I think it's understanding that purpose, and that purpose has to be rooted in the fact that we're all people, and what's our people goal, and then all these other pieces can come in later, whether it's race and gender. I think those things are important to remember, to keep as a part of our conversation. But then if we're talking about finding one thing, thing. I think that the one thing for me would be peopling, would be to understand our humanity first. And being human means that we include everybody, making sure everyone feels like they have all the things that they need. And if that's not happening, then maybe we need to rethink what our core is. I don't know if that, I don't necessarily feel like that answers, but I also might be misunderstanding. Yeah, I'm exploring the idea. Yeah, I'm not an expert in any way, shape, but I think anybody here is. But I think it's a really powerful question. Humanity's a start. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Food, water, clothing, shelter. Yeah.
Well said. I'll just pass it on. She did answer and say some of the things that I wanted to share. So thank you.
I think it's a very challenging question because it makes sense to think that if we want to function as a society, there should be some certain level of compromise coming from each party. But at the same time, I think that there should be some room for compassion and understanding. Just because I believe, okay, I'm Nigerian, I'm Christian, and doesn't mean I have to enforce that. I enforce that, okay, my fellow that is Asian, that is Muslim, that is Buddhist has to follow my own set of rules or set of traditions. I think there's some level of compassion coming from that we are all different, and this is not which one is superior. Everyone is entitled to their beliefs. So as much as we are coming together to function together, there should be some level of compassion so that we do not compromise too much of our identity just so that we fit in.
That angry, that aggressiveness, just these other thoughts. I didn't graduate until I was 27 years old, so not too long ago. And I went to the school at the Aboriginal Community Campus. And I don't know, I must have been an angry teenage, young adult, and just getting to know who my teachers were. And I seen this elderly lady, must have been 50s or so. I'm like, why do I get that F in white B as a teacher? Not knowing who she was. Not knowing her at all, I was like, okay, that's my teacher, and just having those encounters growing up over those years as being 14 to 26 years old. And that's where my life changed around how to think, what their life is, what they've been through. They don't know who I am. Why should I judge who they are? So that was my thought. So anyways, I got to meet her, and she was a lovely lady. And just always on me on my assignments. I'm like, geez, get out of here. I know what to do. That was my attitude, 27 years old. Just because of everything I've experienced, the life that I lived. And my life changed in 2007. When I graduated from my grade 12, my GED, she asked me, that same teacher, she said, do you want to come live with me? I'll help you get into university. I'm like, geez, what does this lady want with me? She's a non-Indigenous older lady. Who am I? Why? And she was always, let's go for lunch, let's go for coffee. And I'm like, oh, geez. And then I was like, what is my classmates going to think? The teacher's pet, right? And I was like, so anyways, she made me think, and she's changed my life. That's my mentor. It's my also known as mom. It's just emotional just talking about it, just because that's who I was. And I've grown from that over the years. She helped me get a cell phone. I still have that same phone number, not the same phone, from 2007. So I moved into her home, and I went to University of Manitoba, my University 1. She helped me get scholarships, bursaries. I had so much money. I never seen that kind of money before. She helped me open up my first bank account. She's just changed so much, and she's been by my side since 2007, and just lets me see things and people in different ways, and just not to, she believed in me. I'm not that person who I thought I was, and she just gave me so much hope. And like I said, I wouldn't be here today, I don't think, if she was on my side. Thank you.